Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Board with Each Other, the board gaming podcast that reviews board games and looks at them through the lens of how well they play at two players. Whether that be with your significant other, your BFF, or with your co pilot who just will not cooperate and keeps spilling coffee all over the controls. I'm Alistair Simpson, and I'm joined as ever by my co host and wife, Hannah Kelly.
Hi, guys.
And today we are reviewing the two-player co-op experience that is SkyTeam. In SkyTeam, you take the role of a pilot and a co-pilot, and essentially you need to land that plane.
Or not, as the
Or
case may
not,
be.
as the case may be. Quite a lot not in later scenarios, but we'll get to that. You do so by each rolling a set of 4 dice at the start of your turn and placing them on a board representing your plane's cockpit. You can
Cockpit.
Oh, this is going to be a long episode, isn't it? You have certain spots on your board that you can place dice, whether that be just the pilot or co-pilot or some shared spaces. A lot of the slots on the board have a number requirement on them. Some do not. For example, your axis and your engines, which control, the tilt of your plane and how fast you're going, are sort of free. They're open spots. You can place any number on there. But there's other elements like your landing gear, your brakes, your flaps
Flaps.
that you need to put specific numbers down or a pair of specific numbers. For each scenario, you have an airport that you're trying to land at, and these airports usually have a number of planes in the sky around them. To clear these planes, you need to place dice on the the air traffic controller spaces, of which the co-pilot has 2 and the pilot has 1. You need to also land your plane at the right time. You have an altitude meter, which is essentially a turn counter. You need to reach the airport at the right time. Sometimes you need to hold back and circle for a bit. Other times you need to speed up to go faster. Some airports have spots on their tracks as you progress through them that require you to roll another die that tells you to put more planes into the sky around there. And when you reach the airport, you basically need to slow right down. You have 3 brakes spots which increase the intensity of your brakes, and you need to basically put your engines and the combined score underneath that to successfully land the plane. There are also spots that you can put down to get coffee, which will basically allow you to alter dice rolls by 1 for each one you use. You have a maximum of 3. And with each scenario and each airport, as you progress through the scenarios, they introduce a lot of different mechanics. So, for example, you have an intern that you need to train that allows you to replace dice from their board onto the board. You have fuel sometimes, which is constantly running out because you have a fuel leak. So there's lots of little sort of quirks to add to the challenge of scenarios as you progress through.
I suppose it's probably worth mentioning you talked about how you can place any sort of number of dice on the axis or on
Yeah.
the gas pedal if you like. But the trick is that you need to make sure that you don't go into a tailspin or a drift.
Yeah, so on the axis, you compare your dice scores, and the difference between those dice scores is the number of times you move the axis in a particular direction. If you move an axis 3 times in one direction from level, you go into spin and you lose the scenario. So it's all about unseen information. And I guess one thing I didn't mention is this is all played behind a screen, so you roll your dice, you don't know what your opponent has, and you cannot communicate at all during the actual game.
You're allowed to have vague conversations before you roll your
Yeah, but not after.
dice, sorry.
Yeah.
But yeah, not after.
So you can't roll your dice, which is a mistake we made the first few times we played it. We rolled our dice and then said, "Oh, don't worry, I can handle this or that." You can't do that. You need to sort of talk about what your priorities are and what you want to do. Like, oh, we need to speed up, for example, but you can't say, "Oh, don't worry, I'll handle X, Y, or Z."
Mm-hmm.
The other thing to mention is as you go through the game, you start to get sort of special abilities and cards that you can take on, usually 1 to 2 per scenario in some of the harder ones. And they do things like if you match dice on the engines, you get an extra re-roll,
Yeah.
or they have various impacts. But again, they all have sort of a lot of them have triggers that you need to do things that aren't necessarily going to be obvious because you know what not your opponent, your partner's going to do to trigger them. So they're more sort of they're a little bit luck based almost. The scenarios ramp up in intensity. They've got basically color coded difficulty levels. So you start with green, move on to yellow, then red, and then black. We have played about 30 to 35 games of this, I think, and we
Mm-hmm.
are currently on the red scenarios, just so for reference in terms of where we've got to with the game and how much time we put into it.
In terms of running time, it can be really, really short.
It can be 2 turns sometimes.
Sometimes you can crash into a mountain almost instantaneously. But I would say probably 20 minutes.
Yeah, a full game's probably going to run you
Yeah.
20, 25 minutes, I'd say, depending on how much thinking time. So obviously this has been quite a big deal and quite a big hit over the last sort of 12 to 18 months, I think, depending on when this goes out. That may, 12 to 18 months might be a little bit meaningless. But yeah, I saw a lot of chatter about this, so I thought, why not? Let's pick it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, anything else you want to mention before we go on to scoring?
No. Okay, so if we move on to scoring, so first up in our general category, we have component. So one thing that I will say about SkyTeam is that when it arrived with quite eco-friendly, sustainable packaging.
It does,
So
yes.
it wasn't all in plastic little wraps; they were in sort of brown paper bags,
Yeah,
and that scores a big, massive tick in the box for me.
yeah, it's always a good thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really, really lovely to see and to show that actually that can be done,
Yeah.
and it is possible. You don't have to have everything shrink wrapped in plastic. I will say though that the components themselves are actually quite fiddly, and I think within about 2 games we'd already lost a piece down the floorboards.
Yes, I just want to give a shout out to Scorpion Mask Games because we did lose a piece. We lost the
Fuel counter.
little counter that goes in the fuel gauge tracker, and they were exceptionally responsive and sent us a new one out pretty much straight away. We didn't have to wait very long at all.
Yeah, so thank you to
Asked
them.
nothing for it either, which massive shout out to them. There's quite a lot of small fiddly components of the board. The board's sort of 3-dimensional to a certain extent, and you've got these tiny little counters, particularly for the gears, the landing gear and the flaps, which if you're not careful are very easy to lose.
I also think it was unusual to set up because you had to stick the 2 player board, not player boards.
You have to fold and stick the
You had to
player
fold
board.
and stick it,
Mm.
and the idea is that you then slot your runways into that so that they
Yeah.
move inside. However, that never really worked for us, so we ended
Okay.
up playing underneath. So it feels like it was a bit over-engineered. Although I really like the concept, I thought it was kind of cool.
Yeah, it is kind of cool, and it could have just been me sticking it together wrong in some
I
way.
mean, probably.
I mean, that's probably more likely than it being a functional issue with it. But
But
once
I
it's
will-
stuck, it's stuck. So just
Yeah.
a shout out when you do open it, be careful. Probably more careful than I was because I was like, la 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 la, stick this down.
What I will say though is that then within that on the top of the board you have a number of little counters that you put into slots. So for example, when you apply the brakes, you then move counter, slide it to the right.
Yeah.
Once those counters are in, you would think they would stay in, but they don't. So the board always has to stay face up. Otherwise, if you turn it over, everything will all
Everything
fall
just
out
falls out,
and
yeah.
fall onto the floor. Again, I suppose it's that trade-off, isn't it, between not making something that's full of plastic
Yeah.
versus making something a bit more sustainable.
Yeah.
And it still works. You just need to be mindful because the first time we did that, went everywhere.
Yeah, I think for one of the first games we played, I tried to put it away a little bit too enthusiastically and lifted the board up too quickly, and they all came flying out
Yeah.
into the sky. So yeah, you need to be careful about that. I think this is probably more relevant value for money, but I am just going to say it here. I think one of the things that impresses me about this is it is obviously a very non-standard construction board game.
hmm
You know, board games are board games. Everything comes with different elements, etc. But this is a quite unique, I assume, production run.
Yeah.
And they've managed to do it in a way that has kept the costs low because I could see this if it was done in perhaps slightly more deluxe fashion you would have been paying quite a lot for quite a small box. So I think that's worth mentioning and taking into context when you're talking about components. Yes, they are quite small and fiddly, yeah, but I think there's reasons for that. I don't think they've done it just because for the sake of it. I think there's a definite reason why they've made the choices that they have.
In terms of footprint when you're playing it, it's actually quite tiny. So again, it's really small. So
Yeah.
again, perfect for things like travel. Probably couldn't play on an airplane.
No, I think no, definitely not.
No.
Unless you're business
And
class.
I also don't think my anxiety can handle that.
Yeah, probably,
Sheep regression.
probably wouldn't be great for the people stood around, sat around you.
But it is quite a small footprint.
Yeah, it is definitely. And I mean, setup and teardown is seconds. It's absolute doddle. You find your airport, you find your scenario, you slot everything into place, you roll your dice, and you're off to the races, basically. I think I like the axis counter. It's like this clear sort of plastic thing that you actually turn like a dial within the board. I'm a big fan of that. And there's lots of just sort of little widgets and things that come along with it for all the scenarios, which are quite exciting to crack out and play around with. It's like, oh, this is like a new board that we've just attached to it. It's fun. It's really quirky.
Yeah. So how did you score it then?
I gave it an 8 for components.
Okay, so I gave it a 7. I hadn't necessarily factored in the whole thing about print run and components in the way that you had, but I did definitely score it up, I think, because of the eco factor.
Sure. Okay. All right.
So our next category then is complexity. So as always, not about how complex a game is or isn't, but how well the complexity serves the gameplay.
Mhm.
The actual rules themselves are fairly straightforward and easy to understand.
They are, yes.
The complexity comes within the scenarios and the challenges that you have to complete in what's a very limited space of time.
Yeah.
I would say that perhaps because I'm a bit slow, I still struggle with the whole axis thing. I'm like, wait, so if I put down a higher score than you, then it will take us this way. Yes, Hannah.
Yes, we have crashed multiple times because Hannah just decided to grab the wheel and just wrench it to the right.
A bit like in real life.
Yeah, just like real life. Yeah, okay, heard.
Yeah.
Understood. I think that's definitely a you problem.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is one of those beautiful examples of the actual getting to understand how the game works is a doddle. You can teach this to somebody in 10 minutes, easy. The complexity comes from the ramping up of the difficulty. So there's complexity in difficulty, but not in rules.
Yeah.
And
what I think is really lovely is the way they introduce the different components. So again, we've all played those games that you learn as you go, and the scenarios get more complicated. But I think what's really lovely about this is they introduce them just the right time.
Yeah.
They ramp up complexity in terms of having to do things with your axis or perhaps speed up, and then once you've got your head around that, they'll introduce another component. And I think that's a really intelligent game design choice.
It is. I think the progression through the scenarios is exceptionally well thought out, and they've obviously put a lot of thought into it. It's very much like, okay, this is an extra element, but it's quite an easy one, so play with us. Okay, you've done that. Let's play with something a little bit more complex now. Okay, you've done both of those. Let's go back to the other one, but now let's throw
Make
a
it really hard.
load of planes at you, and you have to turn in particular ways. And it's just that ramping up in difficulty is a very smooth curve, which I was really impressed by. Until you get to the red scenarios where they decide to just pull out baseball bats, start beating you over the head, which is great because that's what I want from the most difficult scenarios. I think we'll circle back to that more in shelf life, but yeah, I think this is a very, very gold standard scenario of how well complexity is tuned to a game.
Yep.
And as a result, I've given it a 9.
Oh, so I didn't give it that much. I gave it a 7.
Okay, so why did you mark it down?
I don't think it was that I marked it down so much. I think it was just so through the magic of editing, I've just gone away and had a good long hard think about my scoring, and I've come to the conclusion that probably I was scoring based on personal preference rather than necessarily the actual category. So perhaps maybe I need to up that score.
I just want to make something clear because it sounds like I've turned the mic off and then shouted at you for a while. I have not done that. Hannah just said, no, I'm going to think about this. And I just sat there and watched. It's like when we play games.
Bastard. Fair, but okay. So I think probably maybe it was a personal preference thing. I also think it's probably worth mentioning that you have a pilot and a co-pilot, and actually the way the things that they can do are slightly different. So as a pilot, you will focus mainly on brakes, whereas as a co-pilot, I am mainly focused on clearing the sky of planes, but also my flaps.
Yeah.
I think probably we should have played more. I always played the co-pilot, and you always played the pilot.
Yeah, interestingly, we started with our roles, and we've never changed.
No, we never have we?
Always just played the same roles.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the clearing the skies thing is more of a burden for the co-pilot. The pilot can still do it, but the co-pilot has 2 slots instead of 1 to be able to do it. Although in some scenarios you both need to be going full steam ahead with that, otherwise you crash. But yeah.
So anyway, back to the original question, what was my score? I originally scored it a 7, but I think probably that's based on my own personal preference. Am I going to go high as a 9? No, probably not, but I will go with 8.
Okay.
Compromise.
All right, fair enough. Okay.
All right, so next up is shelf life, and under that we talk about things like value for money, but also replayability.
Yeah.
So where does this land price point wise?
Usually under £25, so 20 to 25. I think the price point is exceptional.
Absolutely.
You don't usually get, as I said in the previous category, the non-standardness of this as a package. You don't usually get for under 30. Even then, is a complete rarity. They've really managed to keep the price down on this, which I think is possibly part of its success. There's a lot of game here. for that money.
Yeah, and so we've played, as you said, over 35
Yeah, I'd say over
games.
35 times, and I'm not done.
And we're not done at all.
No.
And we have an expansion that we're going to go to. And also, the
Mm.
expansions are fairly cheap.
I think the expansion was like 10 quid.
Yeah.
Um,
So you've
and that
got a lot.
introduces new rules, new airports, all sorts, new boards, I think.
Yeah, so you've got an awful lot of road or, runway
Sky.
sky with this game. So yeah, I think 20 odd quid is a really, really reasonable price point for
Absolutely.
something like this,
Yeah.
for the amount of playtime that we've got out of it. In terms of replayability, so what we haven't really touched on is that each of the scenarios can be quite difficult. So
Yes.
therefore you have to play each scenario multiple times in order to be able to.
I mean, you don't. You could just
Well,
pick
you
any
could just be
scenario.
really good.
No, or you could just pick any scenario you like and play that. There's nothing in the game that states you need to play them in order. You can just open the book and go, oh, I'm going to want to play that one. I mean, the way we do things, we are quite a stickler for that.
Yeah, my point was that because the scenarios are difficult, quite often you'll have to replay the scenarios.
Yes. Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
you do get replayability in that sense. However, my question to myself is, once I've completed that scenario, is it likely that I would say for us to go back to it?
Mm.
I think there is an element of one and there isn't an element of I would go back and play with it, but I think I would need a bit of time.
Yeah, no, completely understood. I think, in essence, I think where the game is heading, we've not got there yet, is once you start to get into the red scenarios, you can bash your head against it 10 times and still
Mhm.
fail. Now, I think we've come across that because I say 35 plays, but I haven't counted the myriad of times that we failed within like 3 turns and we
You just
started.
didn't count it,
Yeah, I
yeah.
just don't count it. But I think there's probably an element of there, especially with an expansion where you go to some of the more interesting scenarios when you just fancy playing it and want a bit of a challenge.
Yeah.
But even if you do treat this as a one and done, I mean, you've got all those scenarios in the box
Hmm.
and more with a very cheap expansion, you're still going to get a huge amount of mileage out of this, perhaps more than a lot of other things.
Yeah.
So even if it is sort of play through everything once and then, okay, I'm done with it, I still think that's exceptional.
I'm struggling to think of a board game under £30 that has given us this many hours
Of entertainment.
of
Yeah,
entertainment.
no,
Yeah.
I can't think of one. Radlands is close.
Yep.
Radlands is definitely close, but I think after that I draw a blank.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, in terms of value for money, it's phenomenal.
Yeah.
It is really, really good. Not the amount of hours you'll get out of a really small price point, if you like it. Obviously, if you enjoy the core game, is second to none.
Yeah. So how did you score it then?
9.
So I always hold off scoring until you tell me how much it costs, but I'll
Yeah.
score it an 8.
Okay. Lovely.
And then our final category under general is fun.
Mm.
So do you have fun when you play it?
Most of the time, yes.
I am thinking about this one particular scenario, which just threw.
Goddamn Kuala Lumpur.
Oh Christ!
We must have played it about 15 times.
Yeah.
The dice just would not behave. It would not be in our favour. And it wasn't harder than some of the other ones we completed with ease. It was just like our bogey scenario. And I think that goes back to my most of the time point. So most of the time, yes, I have a really, really good time playing this. I think it's a really enjoyable puzzle each time.
Hmm.
It's thematic, it's
Hmm.
dramatic.
Hmm.
It doesn't outstay its welcome.
Hmm.
I have a really good time.
I think that's the other thing as well, isn't it? It's that whole thematic thing. Never did I think that I was going to have fun trying to land a plane.
Yeah, yeah, but you find that so many times with board games, the themes that just don't scream out to you. Sometimes you play it, it's like, actually, this works so much how it captures the imagination.
Yeah.
And even though I'm not interested in it,
Hmm.
I'm now interested in it because it's a fun mechanism.
But we all know for a fact that pilots sit there drinking, chugging back coffee, rolling die, and that's how they land the plane. That's why everyone applauds when the plane lands.
By giving the interns to do stuff. Yeah, yeah, totally.
Got a fuel leak out the window, and there are planes just crashing into you left, right, and centre.
So yeah, I do have a wonderful time most of the time. Why I say most of the time is it can be a frustrating experience if the dice are not going your way.
Yeah, but also it is a quick, short, snappy game, and if you're having one of those nights where the dice are not in your favour, you just pack it up and move on to something
Yeah, you
else.
just shrug like, ah, fair enough. That was 20 minutes.
I think what's also really interesting is when we come to the most difficult scenarios. Uh, One of them was you have 60 seconds per
Oh
turn.
yes.
So for little old me here, who likes to think and pontificate for quite a while, I was like, no, no, no.
It's your
It
worst
was the
nightmare.
most stressful experience I'd ever had. I was like, oh, we're not doing this anymore. Get away, we're never playing this game ever again.
Yeah, you weren't on board with
I
that
was
one.
not on board with that at all. I
Uh,
did not like that. It was like, maybe we can increase the time to 2 minutes or maybe 3 minutes. And you're like, Hannah, no. And I was like, no. But
yeah,
also, I think that's what's really lovely about that high, that final level, if you like.
yeah, it
You pick and
starts. Yeah,
choose.
and it throws really difficult things at you, and it's up to you what challenge you want to do. But I think obviously for you, that's not a challenge you even want
that's
to
not
do.
fun.
You
That's
just
just
find it
stressful.
horrifying
And
and stressful.
yes,
Yeah. Whereas I was quite interested in it, but you were like, nope, nope, nope,
I was
nope.
like, oh, just throwing dice at the board. I was like, I can't even think. There's no way I can think.
We crashed within 60 seconds.
Yeah, probably because I didn't put a dice down.
Yeah. Or we just put something completely random in the wrong space. It's like, what do you? What, oh no, now we're dead. Yeah, you don't do hope so well with the thinking under pressure thing, do you?
Right.
Yeah.
What I would also say is that for a game that's really simple, and you kind of touched on this earlier, it's that gentle building of different challenges and the way they all marry up together. So you might have a fuel leakage and an intern
Mm,
that keeps it fresh. And I think no, aside from the first maybe couple where it was just
yeah.
teaching the core concepts, no scenario, if you
Right.
like, felt the same, and it constantly felt fresh. And I
Yes.
think that was again really intelligent game design.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah, fully agreed. There's a couple of other things as to why I find it so fun, but I'm going to save those because I think they're more to do with how it approaches co-op. So I'm
Mhm.
going to save those for the next category. Anything else you want to say on the fun?
Mm, no, that's about it.
Okay, so I gave it an 8.
Okay, I also gave it an 8.
All right, fantastic.
Okay,
Okay, so
let's add
let's
some up.
yeah, let's do it. We add those up, we average them out as we always do, and that gives us an overall general rating of 8, which I'm really happy about.
Yeah,
This is
solid
a
game.
solid 8. It's a really good game.
Okay, so for our 2-player rating scales, first up we have table talk and getting to know you. I mean, you've kind of already said it. There is no talking, no talking allowed.
No talking. So yeah, not great for the old table talk thing. However,
hmm
what is really interesting about this game is it relies on you being able to read your opponent. I keep saying opponent.
Not everything's a fight, pal.
I just want this to be a competitive who can crash the plane first game. Um, you have to sort of guess and second guess what somebody is going to do, particularly around the axis and the
hmm
engines. And I find that as a getting to know somebody experience really interesting.
There is, I've thought about this quite a lot. There's no better way to describe it than a dance.
I was going to use that very phrase, but I was going to use it in the next category.
Okay,
But
but
fine.
there's this absolute dance where you have to work out whether you've got quite a good hand, and therefore you let your opponent lead with the things that are really really critical. So for example, if speed is what you've established
Yeah.
is going to be the priority, you let your opponent lead, not your opponent, I've done it again,
Yeah.
but you let your other player lead, or whether if you're really struggling you try and blonk it down there first in the hope that they can kind of counteract.
Yeah, it's that non-verbal communication via dice, which as an avid board game I'm all about.
Passive aggressive dice placing.
When you say passive aggressive, I'm just trying to communicate. You're just bitching at me through the medium of dice. Look, Al, it's a 1. What are you going to do about that? But no, there is a really interesting element to play
hmm
here where there's that constant back and forth, and you really have to. I feel like this is a game that is easier with playing with somebody when you know how they tick
Yeah,
and you know what they're doing and you know how they sort of behave.
yeah. It would
Um,
be so hard if you had never met somebody before and you're at a board game club, for example,
yeah,
and you crack this out because you'd
yeah.
be like,
What are you
"What are
doing?
you doing?"
What are you doing? Um, And there are those little elements that you can communicate non-verbally, like you can put something down on a coffee when, like first, for example, to say like, okay, there's problems here. Yes, I'm going to use one of my dice to give you an opportunity to sort of fix it. And I think it becomes really interesting when you've got the extra boards in play as well, because there always becomes a little bit of a standoff about who's going to save us not blowing 6 fuel on a turn and all that kind of thing.
Turns out neither of us most of the
Yeah,
time.
sometimes it's just, oh, just let it flow out. It's fine. We'll be fine. We'll fill up at some point. We plot us, we didn't. Um, yeah, it's a really interesting experience in getting to know somebody, and I think this makes it a really good game for couples and really good friends
Mhm,
because I think you will have a better experience because you kind of know how the other person ticks.
mhm.
Or if you don't, you'll find out, which
Yep,
is also really interesting.
yep.
So yeah, I've given it an 8 because
Good for
I think
you.
as an experience that requires zero communication. I play quite a few games that require zero communication. This one I actually do think allows you to get to know the other person. So yeah, it's I think it does really really well in this category for me.
Yeah, so I'm going to have to disagree. I think there is a lack of communication. That is by
That's
nature of
the
the
game.
game. I know it is, but also, there is, and I think you can say a few very vague sentences before you roll your die, but after that, all bets are off. So actually, I don't think there is that huge amount of interaction there.
Mm,
I understand what you're saying, that I think that makes the game, makes the experience. But I think if you're looking for a game where you're interacting, where you are getting to know you,
mm.
I don't think this is it. I do think there's an element of, as you said, when you do know somebody, it becomes a really fun dance, but I think that's something else. So I think under the original criteria, then no, and therefore I've rated it a 4.
Okay, all right, 5. I'm not changing my rating. I stick by it.
Never do.
No, I never do.
It's
I
always me
stick
that
by
revises them. I'm like, oh shit, he's right.
it.
Hannah's random scoring of the day.
No, it's fine. Opposite ends of the spectrum now.
Yeah. So then let's talk about the cooperability.
So this is interesting. The
Yeah.
point that you just made, I was about to make under this.
Yeah.
So when I play a co-op game, I like to strategize with my partner or
Hmm.
partners. I like to be able to tactically think things through and make a plan and see that plan executed. I think that's the joy out of co-op games for me a
Hmm.
lot. And you can't do that in this.
I
So,
disagree.
okay, but I kind of agree with the point that you just made.
Okay, right, fine.
And I think it lacks that teamwork aspect to a certain extent where you've got a plan and you execute it. You can't, you can make, as you said, vague plans, but you can't really pull off something really amazing that you've planned to do. And that's something that really ticks my boxes in a co-op experience, and that is missing here. And I think it's worth saying.
So the reason that I like it is because I think again it's very reactive. So I can see when you've had a really difficult hand because you've played something stupid in a stupid axis,
Well, it could just be me being
or
stupid.
just you being
Yeah.
stupid, and you run out of your reroll die, and therefore you have to think and you have to work with each other,
Hmm.
um, or with your other partner's dice. And I think that for me is the bit that I really like.
Yeah, fine. But it's just getting different things out of co-op
Yeah,
experiences, I guess. And that's the beauty of this.
I have to work with your shit dice rolls, basically.
Yeah, yeah, usually. Um, but that's the beauty of this format and this
Hmm.
podcast. We come out of we've got different likes,
Hmm.
and we can clearly say that for my money, what I like out of co-op experience, it doesn't quite tick that box in this
Hmm.
regard, whereas for you it does. So that's fine.
I also think we've played co-ops before where I don't necessarily feel like I'm in it with you.
Mm.
Whereas I absolutely do because I think turns are very quick. And
Can you talk a bit more about what you mean in it with me? What do you mean by that?
so that we are both striving towards the same end goal. And I
Mm.
think that we do make selective choices. So, for example, when you've got a 6, you will bump that down on the fuel because you'll sacrifice that 6 roll to do that.
Mm.
And I think the sacrifices that you make on your turn in order to make sure the game progresses, I find that really not satisfying, but I find that gives me my element of strategic, perhaps.
Okay.
I don't know, but I really
No.
like that. And
Right.
I also like how maybe I just think you're being more strategic than you actually are, and you are just walloping dice down as and when you see fit.
I mean, it's me.
Yeah, probably. Maybe I'm ascribing a level of confidence to me that doesn't actually exist.
I just do things.
You just t-shirt, yeah. So,
No, I don't. I do think about what I'm doing in this
um,
sometimes.
and when we've had Kuala Lumpur, for example, and we finally beat it, there is this huge sense, I think, of shared
satisfaction. Yeah,
satisfaction,
absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
which again rates it really high for me.
Yeah, no, that was one half of what I was going to say. The other half, again, you talked about in the previous category. It is like a dance. That is the
Mm.
easiest way I can describe it. With somebody leading, and then the other person leads, and then the other person leads. And I think that, as a cooperative experience, is a thing of beauty. I
Yeah.
absolutely
And
love
I've
it.
not seen it or experienced it anywhere else.
No, no.
I think that dance, that quiet, silent dance, is just really quite magic.
The only thing I think that came close in sort of mechanism, I guess, would be the crew. That's the only thing I
Hmm.
can think of that's sort of vaguely close, but this does it so much better for my money.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's something that's quite hard to replicate, I think, and it's done it really, really well. So I mean, overall, I gave it a 7. Sort of on balance of those two things, it's a
Okay.
7 from me.
So I gave it an 8.
Okay, fine. And here we would normally talk about scalability, but obviously this is a two-play experience. So I think
Moot point.
one of these days we might need to think of a replacement category for this when it's a two-player thing. But today is not that day. We haven't planned ahead that much. So it'll just be the two scores for now. So let's add those up. So that gives us an overall rating of 6.75. So we round as always to a 7.
Which I think probably would be higher if it weren't for me and my table talk.
Union table talk. It's always a union table talk. Yeah, I think it's a better two-play experience than that personally than the 7 suggests. But hey ho, it is what it is. And again, the meat is in the conversation, isn't it? So if you go choose which direction, pick a side, people, pick a side. Okay, great. Thank you very, very much for joining us. We hope you enjoyed the episode. We've got lots of other content, obviously, online. If you want to, if this is your first time listening to us and you want to check on the back catalogue, we're doing regular bite-sized episodes now, so much shorter, sharper looks at simpler games, shall we say? Well, not necessarily simpler, but small box games and expansions and things like that. But until next time, be good to each other, have fun, play loads of board games.